podcasting is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're gonna get out of it.
Yeah, yeah. That quote from Forrest Gump is ridiculous to me because this is you never know what you're gonna get, except if you actually look at the box of chocolates where it actually tells you all of the chocolates, so you know exactly what you're going to get. So, Forrest Gump's mother didn't know what the hell she was talking about.
I never fully understood that either. Yeah, I
Yeah.
understand.
All right. Welcome to the Unnameable Podcast with Jay Underwood
And Chris,
and today we are going to be talking about the new Player's Handbook, how to make dice rolls matter, and methods of getting into character. So let us start off with the new Player's Handbook. So obviously this has been big news all over YouTube and the gaming world. Hasbro and WotC have released their sort of new updated kind of 5.1, I guess you could
is it
call it.
5.1? I've been seeing 5.5, but
5.5, yeah, edition of the Player's Handbook. It's not a new edition, but it's sort of like a significant update. Rather, it's an addition to the rules that already exist, though there are some changes that some of which is getting some controversy online, unjustly so, it seems, in my opinion.
I'm sure we're going to be talking about some of those things, but
Yeah. Well, what's your opinion of this new update from what you've read?
well, no, my biggest question though is, do you need 5e? I guess you don't need 5e in order to use this, right? They'll have all the rules there.
Yeah, this is not an addendum. You don't you need the original handbook, and then you have to buy this one on top of that. No, you can buy this one that includes all of the original rules plus the new rules in addition. So it's essentially a new player's handbook, but with some changes to the core classes, something of a subpar crafting system, a few new feat tweaks here and there.
I heard
And so on and so
Bastions.
forth.
I think Bastions is a new thing too. Kind of like creating your own little like hub.
Yes, changing race to species, which is a interesting choice. So yeah, it's no longer the elven race, the human race, the dwarven race. It is now the
Elven species.
the elven species.
The
Yeah,
human
I don't know.
species.
I don't know how I feel about that. It seems coded to sci-fi. Excuse me. It seems coded to sci-fi terminology by using species.
I suppose it makes sense, but at the same time, is it necessary?
Yeah, I guess it's trying to be sensitive to a lot of the kind of political posturing that's happening now in the world these days, and trying
Yep.
to kind of be as sort of diplomatically neutral as possible. And kudos for doing that.
Yeah.
One of my players had a much better suggestion.
Was it just like ancestry, lineage?
Lineage. That's right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It seemed like lineage might be a better an idea for, but I like how they decoupled the sort of game systems from the species or race or lineage or whatever we want to call it. So, like if you're playing a high elf, you get like a +2 intelligence, +2 whatever it was. No,
Yeah.
that's gone. Now it's connected to background, which makes a lot more sense. So I quite like
Nope.
that.
I also agree. My campaign, everyone's a human, so they can just put their points wherever they want to.
Yeah, I think one of my problems with 5e is that all except for the humans have dark vision, basically, which I've never liked. I've never liked. It's like make dark scary again.
Yep, I agree. I agree. Hey, that's why I have humans. They can't
Yes,
see in the dark.
even if people want to be elves, or I call it luminant in my world, but if they want to be this particular character, then I always say, but you don't have dark vision.
Yeah. Well, that was also one of the things that people were talking about in that one of the base classes for this 5.5, right,
Hmm.
can just innately fly,
Yeah,
which takes away so much of the tension of any kind of like traversal, like any kind of like a, traversal upwards,
yeah,
like cliffs. Oh, you can
yep.
fly.
You can just get up there.
Oh, there's a pit. There's a spiked pit. How are you gonna get over it? Just fly over
Yeah.
it.
Reminds me of the Mitch Hedberg joke where on escalators can never be broken; they can only become stairs. so, so he's like, "Sorry for the convenience. You could still get up there."
Like falling should be just like the dark.
Mhm.
Falling should be a real threat to
Yep.
people.
They've added these things called maneuvers, character classes, like the barbarian now basically has like
Yep.
fighter maneuvers. And that sounds all well and good. I guess what I find is maybe kind of petting me backwards or whatever if I was a cat. What's sort of like scratching me the wrong way is I keep seeing all these little bells and whistles as things that perhaps inexperienced players would find themselves drawn back to their character sheet and say like, oh wait, how do I do this thing? And I get this other thing to do, and like stuff that keeps interrupting play, like all this stuff with maneuvers can just be part of the narrative explanation of a die roll, in my opinion. Why make it a mechanical thing?
All I have to say to you, Jay,
Hmm.
is welcome back to Pathfinder 1E, where all these things are all planned out. They all have their own stats and their own ways of doing it. Dirty trick, reposition, like, you know.
Yeah, well, but that's what I'm sort of arguing against. I think they all have little rules against with them, right? Oh, if you do this, it gives you a +2 on whatever. This gives you a +1, whatever, and like
The thing is, though, I know your playstyle, and you like to keep things simple because it goes a lot faster that way, right? You can keep on moving forward, and it sounds like what they're doing here is they're adding more stuff. They're adding like it's the 5e but plus, really, because they don't want to detract anything from 5e for those 5e players that are still hanging on, right? But they want to add something to make it more dynamic, make it more make it newer for them, make it a different experience than just 5e. And by adding stuff, that's how they find they're going to make it interesting or new.
yeah, I guess so. I've always found that the since 5e, I really like the changes compared to fourth edition. And
Oh,
obviously
fourth edition
was a mess. Yeah,
it was a video game.
it was a video game. Yeah. I mean, fifth edition was great. It brought a lot of people back in. It brought a lot of new players into the fold. Awesome, it was a huge success.
Yep,
I've
agreed.
This goes into the like kind of tactical versus theater of the mind kind of styles of gameplay, where fifth edition always seems to kind of like want to have a foot in both camps, and I think it's doing it relatively successful. But a lot of the kind of accoutrement on the outside seems to be okay. We got to give players more kind of tactical moves in which to for that game, for like the people who use the 3D tabletops and the maps and all that kind of stuff. Whereas, for me, who pretty much hinges, I'm borderline drama system at this point with my own game. I just prefer the narrative explanations of things rather than the, okay, well, if you want to take that 5-step forward, but you're in melee, but you're also 5 feet away from another enemy, but you don't have the nifty step or whatever, like
nifty step. Are you bad mouthing nifty step?
Nifty step will prevail. That's the name of the episode right here. What is it? Misty step.
Misty step. Nifty. Oh, that step is mighty nifty.
Whoa, what are you, little soft shoe there? You got a little Gene Kelly action going on there.
That's quite a nifty step.
Those are some slick moves. Yeah. All right. Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Okay. End of tangent time, by the way.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is that they're headed more towards the board gamey, or like the tactical war map type playstyle. You think by adding all these extra rules?
I feel like it's getting in, like its branding is getting in the way of itself. It sees all these great innovations that are happening in this sort of indie RPG space, and the 5.0 editions are like kind of trying to catch up with all these new trends, but still keeping loyal to like what makes the D&D brand D&D. And so they're sort of like they're trying to like put their feelers out and stretch it here and kind of pull it here, and good on them. You gotta change, you gotta innovate, and all that kind of stuff. There's a few more things that I did want to talk about before we move on this point. Like, so like there's like a thing like epic boons that are a thing that characters get at like level 19, who plays at that level anyway. The game's pretty much broken after level 13.
Nobody,
anyway.
yeah. That's almost like Pathfinder too. Pathfinder, like I have some players at 16, and it is so much harder to DM for someone who can like alter the world dramatically with a single spell, right?
Yeah, battles become who wins initiative first will win, or save and die. I mean, that's exciting in
Yeah.
its own right, but the battles, just if they don't become that, they just drag on with these like
Yeah.
fistfuls of
Slog.
dice and just like, oh, and like calculating and adding them up. Okay, I did, hold on,
Nope.
75 damage or whatever.
At that point, at that level, at 16, level 16, all my enemies do average damage. I've stopped rolling for damage.
That's
Now,
smart.
players like to roll. Players love rolling their dice, and they will, right?
Hmm.
But for me, I can't stand it. I'm like, okay, they do this amount of damage. You expect that.
Yeah.
If you get a crit, it's double that amount. So enjoy that. You know about Pathfinder Second Edition? Do you know about their attack rolls with that?
Tell me.
In that system, I think is it if you roll higher than like 5 over the AC, or there's like a specific number over the AC, it automatically becomes crit.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Meaning that there is a reason to have a higher attack bonus other than just like rolling the d20 and adding it to it, right?
Yeah. It speeds up combat too, especially if you're playing the game where you've got random encounter tables and then you encounter lower level enemies that you can just like mop up
Right?
over.
Everything's gonna be a crit. It's just gonna
Yeah.
be like crit, 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 crit.
Well, I think we let that topic get away from us a little bit, but overall, the new 5.5 addition expansion to the player's handbook, he's got some good things about it. Let's move on to our next topic. And now it's time for GM Influence Corner. Way!
The magic wheelchair. Um, wheeling and
GM Influence Corner. Way!
all right. Our next topic: making dice rolls matter. For making dice rolls matter, I've pretty much divided into 4 different categories. Maybe why rolling is necessary, or when you should be rolling. And I've heard, yeah, of course, you should only really roll dice when you have like the chance for failure. Because if you can't fail, then what's the point of it?
The classic perception check roll or
Yeah. Well,
investigation check roll where the key piece of the puzzle is there and they all fail the check and it's like, well, here it is anyway.
well, either that or they all have like plus 14 to the roll, and you're like, come on, you can't really miss this. What's the point of even, right? Their numbers are ridiculous, like plus 17 to something. I will have them roll, and allow me to explain. Allow me to explain why.
Go for it.
I've broken it down into B.A.I.T. B-A.I.T. Okay, B.A.I.T. B for bravado or for fun. A for advancement. I for information or lore, and T for tension. Those are the only reasons right now that I can think of. Maybe you can introduce some more if you think of any. Let's go through them. Bravado. It allows the players to flaunt their skills, or when something comedic comes up, something fun or something interesting. And like this is the one case when even if they have a really really high number, I will allow them to make that roll because they know that they can easily pull off this task, and it just makes them look good, impresses everyone. They all have fun for it, right? Or sometimes even with those high numbers, they get that critical fail, and it leads to like some sort of funny situation that again everyone will remember in that session.
A hero moment.
Yeah,
Or
exactly.
the failure during a potential hero moment. It's when the spotlight is on the character and they have a moment to really be who the character that they wanted to be, whatever their archetype is. The archer kind of shooting the apple off of the top of the head. Here it comes. Everyone kind of laser focuses in on that dice roll because if they miss it, William Tell's story is going to go a different way. You shot him in the head.
They need that chance. They need that chance sometimes to show off, right? I think that is a huge thing. Everyone gets behind it. Everyone is expecting it, and they can't wait to see it happen, right?
And you should probably give each character at least one or multiple times to do that per session.
In an ideal world,
Yeah.
where they roll higher than 3.
Yes. I mean, some days the dice gods are there's always 1 or 2 players who seem to have a bad night and they can't roll anything above a 3. Yeah, it happens
On
to
the
the
other
best of them.
hand, though, my dice, they seem to be gifted from the gods themselves. They always roll high against the players. Hey, I have those special dice. Those I don't know what they're called.
The weighted dice that always roll
No, no, no,
sixes.
no, 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 not those dice.
I use a weighted d20s. I don't know why my players TBK all the time.
No, those ones that are like supposed. I forget the name of the company that makes them, but
Oh,
they're the
fudge, the
dice.
fudge dice, you mean, with the
No,
plus
not the
and minus.
fudge.
No,
No,
wait.
no.
All right,
Oh,
well,
okay,
we're getting off time. So bravado, yes? The bravado
Bravado.
is one, yeah. Advancement,
Advancement. Anything that pushes the narrative forward or the story forward, right?
right. Can you give an example?
For an example, for that would be like if they were to go into say meet the king or whatever, right? Uh, you would want them to roll because there's the chance of failure, but it's something that needs to be done in the story anyways,
Hmm.
right? For that diplomacy check or for that intimidate check or whatever sort of check. It's not really bravado necessarily.
Yeah, I love it. I almost want to add to that because the Call of Cthulhu D20 system has something really interesting wherein the way level up mechanics work is that every skill that you've sort of tested, let's say your archaeology skill or your history skill, that you haven't used luck with. So in the system, if you fail a roll, you could kind of
Mm,
spend your luck points to kind of bump up your roll such that it gets above the threshold, above your percentage. In that case, you don't get to attempt to level up your skill because it was luck. It
yep.
wasn't your skill. But for the ones that you do roll and pass, you kind of check them off. And at the end of the session, everyone has sort of like a post game kind of leveling up like roll session, which is really exciting because all the ones that you have like little check boxes next to, you then roll, and if you roll above your percentile, then that skill goes up. Let's say you have a 25% chance because this system is a D100 system. 25% roll in history. You've made a check in the system. You've passed. You put a check mark at the end of the system. You make a roll. If you roll above a 25, now I've got a 30% for the next
Yeah.
session in history.
Additionally, in my campaign, I was a little bit of one of those, I don't know, not a rules lawyer, but I was being very careful on how they're leveling up their characters at some point. And I kind of had them only put points in things that made sense for their characters to be like put like extra skill points. Like, because in Pathfinder, you can allot them however you wish, right? It's not just an automatic progression, so you can put things into certain ranks into certain skills. And I was being very careful. Okay, you've like you can't just suddenly become like a master, like a blacksmith, using all like seven of your ranks to do craft like armor, right? In one level, if you haven't done any of that stuff during the sessions leading up to it.
Yeah, you preface that by saying being a rules lawyer, but I think that could get baked into a really exciting kind of post-session or even mid-session like downtime moments when the characters are in times of peace and not adventure, when they're crafting their skills or learning their blacksmithing trade or whatnot. And the characters are spending whatever points they get when they level up or
Yeah.
uh, uh, to narrate each point that they get and what they put it into and what they've been doing in order to justify that point as part of like a an off adventure time, which is
Yeah.
what I often do with my sessions. Okay, you guys all get 4 points. Now tell me how you spend them and what you're doing to justify what you spend them. Oh, I spend a year in the library researching so and so, and check there your arcane skill goes up one, and then I go and travel out in nature to find wilderness lore, blah 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 blah, and so on and so forth. But getting back to making die rolls matter. Yeah, that's the T in TRPG stands for tangent when it comes to the two of us. Information.
Information and lore. These are just to add to what the players know about the world. So making those like history checks and those kind of the Arcana checks, or I'm not even sure which ones they have in 5e anymore.
Mhm.
Um, this could also like meld into like advancement, or it could also like aid them for like alternate solutions to problems. Because sometimes it's something that they'll learn from one of these like history checks or local checks or something like that, they can use almost as a tool to they have this information now and they can apply it to finding solutions to some of their problems.
Yeah. I do love investigation roles, or maybe I should call them spot hidden roles, because any key clue that players are required to find to ensure the story progresses forward is never a role. They're
It
just going to find it.
should never be hidden. Yeah.
It should never be a role, but roles such as an insight role, an investigation role, spot hidden role only will ever add moments of additional information that can just be fun, and
Yeah.
also give the chance for the GM to kind of like flex or think about something that like he didn't plan in his session notes, but now, oh, because they decided to search this little area and they rolled really high, well, now there's going to be something there that, from the player's perspective always was there from the but you're just making it up on the fly, and coming up with something,
Yep.
and they feel rewarded for having found something. You feel rewarded for bringing something new to the encounter.
And
Who knows?
but
It could
also to the
become
world though,
central.
right?
Yeah, and it could
Right.
become central to the story as well. Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I mean just by information and lore. And the last and the most obvious one, tension, right? Because that's what these games are really built upon is adding to the stakes, right?
Hmm.
Tension. These roles include combat, or like for the DMs, the random tables or obstacles, and like opposed checks and things like that for the DM versus the player, or player versus player type things, and just a way to ratchet up the stakes and and energize your players pretty much.
Right. It's almost as if the way to make die rolls matter are going to come down to how one role plays or runs the game within the so-called like three pillars of gaming, kind of like
Yep.
exploration, and then combat and whatnot. So if your combat is kind of highly like zoomed in, and you're rolling for each move and each sword, then yeah, a lot of that can become potentially monotonous. And so it is a real subtle art to ensure that players are still interested in each um, roll of dice, rather than waiting for their turn to roll the dice. And so
Mm.
I I do think that what players can do is, by describing their actions pocketed off of what another player has previously done. Let's say player A does an action as the barbarian, smashes through the door. Then player B comes in and says, while player A smashes through the door, I do this. And then they roll their die. And, by extension, the die rolls become important, because that other character, the barbarian who smashed the door on their previous turn, now somehow feels tied in to what the player B is doing by sheer force of the narrative statement. And so, players should be encouraged to almost take moments of like kind of GM authority.
And
Um,
sometimes after like people after players take their actions, I will do that myself as well.
yeah, yeah. Always add a little color commentary after a move, after a roll. Yeah,
Yep.
it's essential. And um, I think how to make die rolls matter, make them matter as the DM. It's easy to say, okay, you pass the check and you hit the guy. No, no, no. Well, your method of explaining how the hit happens or what
Yep.
happens as the result of the roll makes the die roll matter, or makes the failure seem more of a failure, or the success seem more of a success. Or if the player who hasn't seemed to get a winning roll in there finally gets one, and even though that wouldn't have like bested the enemy, well, you fudge the numbers and it does now, and that makes it feel like a really great moment. I'm sure some GMs out there are like, no, don't ever do that. It ruins the system and blah 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 blah. But I think it's essential. And if
Yep.
ever my players walk into a combat encounter and they all know that, okay, they're goblins, so they all have like whatever 5 hit points each and 7 armor class or whatever the stat block is, then I feel like it's a sort of a failure, because they've already gamed the system. They're never going to know what any monster they encounter. They're never going to know what it can do, how strong it is, how many hit points it has. They're not going to know any of that in any encounter. Side the second time they encounter the same bees, and now they've kind of prepared, but it happened organically and in game. So yeah.
Well, going off of the information and lore, I allow my players to make certain checks depending on what their class are, like what class they're playing. right? So if they're a wizard or if they know a lot about like magical creatures, they can make that Arcana check. I think almost for free, like before the whole combat begins, so that they get a little bit more information. Like, of course, I'm not going to hand them over a stat block, right? But let them, maybe figure out, oh, they don't like this. They pretty much can ask me a question depending on like how high they roll on their skill checks to give them a bit of an advantage, and that leads into the information lore kind of section.
To add one last thing here to tension, then I think a great way to make a die roll matter is by explaining the results of a failure before the die is even cast. At a certain moment, the battle is happening on the rooftop of the kind of wagon that's careening towards the edge of the cliff, while the heroic fighter is kind of fighting off his arch nemesis, and they're battling it off, and you're doing Spielberg stretching of time where they seem to get further and further away from the cliff, even though they would have gone off of it 15 minutes ago.
Have a small dialogue amongst themselves.
yeah. I mean, it's great, but until you get to that moment of like, okay, you got 3 more turns before this caravan is going to go off the cliff. You got 2 more turns. You go, oh, then this is the jump. This is it. And if you fail this jump, you're going over. And then now everyone's like, you've ratcheted up tension to such a point that the whole table just watches as this die is cast, and then they roll a crit fail. And of course, you're going to give them a chance to like grab onto some like roots that are hanging off the side, or to save themselves in a heroic fashion. But that roll is going to be the most exciting moment, which in a way kind of bakes back into Bravado. And there we've come full circle. Bravado, advancement, information, tension, B.A.I.T. Players should think about it, use it in their systems. Anything else?
No, I think we covered everything.
Awesome. And that sounds like a wrap up. We're moving on to our next segment. Methods of getting into character, or getting your players into character, or perhaps we could extend it even to getting the game started. We all know when everyone gets over, you get your Doritos and Mountain Dew and whatever, and everyone's sitting around having a good old time talking jokes, and then it's time to begin. And that's always part of some of the most difficult bits. So we could break this discussion up into several categories. 1, simply starting a session. 2, players sort of getting into the skin of their characters, especially from session 0 and session 1. Usually takes, in my opinion, 2 or 3 sessions for them to even get kind of the feel of who their characters are once they start interacting with the world. But are there any methods or techniques that you have for other GM/players out there that maybe they may be able to use in order to sort of get players into the game or into their character?
Well, okay, let's go from the top. starting a session. All right. My method generally is, okay, you do all your talking, you get it all out, right?
Get the giggles out.
Get the giggles out. Yeah, there's always going to be more than you expect. Once that music starts, though, because I usually tend to have like a theme song, right?
Boom.
And once that theme song hits, that means we're getting serious. We're done. We are playing right now.
Yes.
Right.
Saving the music until the moment of game start. Yeah, having some sort of ritualistic action.
Ring a bell. Ring a
bell. They all start salivating. Wrong experiment. Or like light a candle or something like that. Place something in front of the DM screen, like something to indicate a starting moment. Yep. This is why playhouses have curtains and stuff. Like the actors don't all just like walk out onto stage and say, "Okay, we're going to begin now. Hamlet, Act 1, and start."
Some sort of indication that we're getting serious now, right?
But getting them into character, what do you there?
There's a difference between first timers and people that we've played with a lot, right?
Yeah.
For it's a totally different method because I just recently played with some fresh blood, some new players, and they didn't know what to do, of course, because they've never done this sort of thing before, and it's sort of letting them just like discover their character in some ways, right? Like the thing is, like I will be a good example for them. Like I'll I'll tell them I'll show them what I'm doing, right?
Yeah.
And they can glean whatever they want from it on how they can play their characters, right? But it's sort of like they need to learn to build their characters for the first time, right?
Yeah, leading by example to GM is great advice. And if you come in with a sort of enthusiasm, and if you're a type of GM that does voices or are not afraid to be a bit silly, perhaps new players, that kind of gives them the
Yeah,
that feeling of play. It's like it's okay, it's safe here to be something different. Where new players maybe don't get that about how to role play. Of course, you'll have some players who come in and just want to break everything, and that stuff's got to be kind of shot down pretty quick,
yeah,
which is easy to do.
definitely.
But most new players, I find, will often, when I was publicly jamming for a while, will sort of follow along and like watch the more veteran players, and then sort of slowly, timidly put their toes in the water before kind of like jumping in. And then a moment along the adventure, they'll kind of like it'll click, and they'll sort of
Yep,
start getting how the rules work, because you don't want to overwhelm them with all the rules and all that kind of
that's
stuff.
right.
Um, and hopefully you do have a few players along the table that are sort of above the page, as it were, who don't keep accessing the player's sheet and the character sheet and whatnot, because the game is real alive when people are looking at each other and are sort of experiencing the narrative rather than the mechanics. And so that's a great way to get into character right there, is get beyond mechanics, knowing that okay, I roll what? I get a +5 to my thing? Yeah, okay. No. What you're rolling for is the fact that you're a soldier with a sword in your hand and you're smiting, you're protecting your hometown. It's not that you roll and you add a +5 to it. That's secondary.
Yep.
Right? You're trying to sort
No,
of frame it in a sort of narrative sense.
no, I agree. I totally agree. Um, it's always good to have a veteran player amongst you to help you out, but yeah, they do look to the DM quite a bit in order to yeah, like you said, wet their toes. When I'm playing a character and when I'm DMing, I don't feel any different at all.
When I'm in the GM chair, I'm feeling more like a director or an editor, or like I'm a real time thinking about moments of like, okay, this character, this moment can this, or chef, this
Hmm.
scene can use a little bit more tension, or another NPC to walk in to like kind of to disrupt this conversation that's going too smoothly, or no, I mean the tension needs to be kind of brought down a little bit, and the heat needs to be turned up or turned down. When I'm a player, I'm not thinking like that at all. I'm following character motivations. I get into character by maybe thinking of a word or a phrase that they might use, that could help with like
Yep.
language choices. Um, and with as a GM NPCs, it's oftentimes just the name. The name will be enough to sort of like get me in to the character and all that sort of situates. I'm like, okay, like when I think about my friend, Steve or whatever, I associate Steve with all of these things, and it's easy to sort of like get into a framework of how to interact as that character. So NPC Steve, who shows up now. Okay, I get it. I know who Steve is. Hey, Steve.
Hey, Steve.
he,
Hey.
he shows
No,
up.
but
He's the dwarven alchemist, or whatever.
like for me, when I'm doing even NPCs, I'm always considering like what they want. Like intent is always on the forefront
Yeah, yeah.
of who they are, right? And it's not so different for me when I'm like DMing or playing a character. I
Hmm.
guess the only difference for me is the stat blocks, really. Like you have more tools to play with on a character sheet than you do with just like I don't know, just a random NPC that they run into on the street and they ask a question about,
Hmm.
right? Now,
Right. Yeah.
other ways that I've thought about that you can perhaps like give them more tools to play with or more paints. Uh, for instance, it would be like quirks. I find like people remember quirks about like certain characters, way that they talk, maybe the way that they walk. The senses. They smell of burnt ash, or
Mhm.
they never change their socks. Like weird things like that. People will remember those kind of things about. Oh, it's that one guard that has that huge bushy mustache, right? More of the the theatrical kind of things that also sometimes helps me. Like you had mentioned that there are some phrases that you use, right?
You
That
you
will.
mean like calisthenics or doing like
Hey,
exercise?
well, no, I'm talking about like like physical costumes, things like
Mm.
that. Some
Oh
people,
yeah, yeah,
you
yeah.
know, you bring a pipe, you hold a pipe, you look very different. You have a whole different kind of like you start to change your mannerisms and things like that.
That's a
Um,
great point. Yeah, like a physical object, like a little wand or a book or
but not just
yeah,
that
a pipe.
though. Like also for certain characters, I will sit differently, right? For someone like more relaxed, you'll be like this, right? With your,
Hmm.
arm over the back of the chair. But then like other characters will be kind of like a little bit more meek and demure. The arms closer together, sitting that way. And players, they will pick up on those kind of things, and they'll start to remember them for those specific reasons.
And then
And of course,
you could trigger that memory again just by before even as they walk into a
yep.
bar, you just
Then he's
assume
like,
position and there he
and then
is, there he
then
is.
there he is,
Yeah, yeah.
Sorvolio. He's right there.
Yeah. No, excellent point. If you change the manner of your speaking, you speak a little bit higher pitched or a little bit lower pitched, and then if you slow down your speaking, then now you are a different individual
Start to add
because
different
you
voices
start to add different voices. And yeah, I'm not the
and
best
different accents.
and different accents. I'm notorious to be terrible at being accents. Oh, if players want me to be Matt Mercer, then they're in for a. Any other techniques that listeners might be able to use in order to help players or themselves get into character?
I guess the last thing that I have written down is like motifs. Sometimes I'll have characters that have certain motifs, and they're not just quirks, right? Like quirks are like something that you can see or something that you can smell, but like motifs are kind of like almost like a distinct feature or concept or design. Like I had a character that was a monk, right? And of course, all the monks like to run around, and I thought of the character as okay. This
All
is
the
a monk.
all,
This is
all the monks like to run around.
There we go. That's another name
That's
for
another
the
title. Another title.
this episode. But like he was like a monkey. He was pretty much like a monkey. And
Yeah, yeah.
everything that I did was related to like a monkey would kind of like sit this way on a tree or something like that,
Hmm.
or a monkey would be, he'd be playful in this situation, right? And always having that motif in the back of your head
Yeah.
sometimes can help create or help guide your character's performance in some ways.
Right, and it could be an allusion to the classic kind of Chinese epic tale, tale
Yeah,
of the Three Kingdoms, or Journey to the East, I believe it's called. Or yeah, have some like your character Harmony had a celestial theme that kind
yep,
of ran through it
yep.
all or whatnot, and just find something that draws the character in, and then draws you in each time.
But just like even a phrase like like the scarred dragon. Like he's not physically a dragon, right? But
Mhm.
that's who he kind of is. He's a scarred dragon, right?
Mm.
Right. Gives you a bit of an idea of who they are.
Similar to using a word or a phrase to help kind of get you into that.
Yeah.
There is a classic YouTube video, and I think it's Pollock is the name of the comedian who tries to champion the one word impressions. Um, and says, it's easy to do an impression of somebody by doing the entire sentence or catchphrase, but you have to do impression of somebody with a single word, and then he goes on to do like the Liam Neeson impression with the word banana.
Yeah, that was pretty good.
And it can't even be a word that like they're associated. It's just gonna be like just like a random word in that character's voice, and then you really nailed the impression. But um, all right, if you've not got anything else, I think we'll have to leave it at that until the next time.
All right. Ciao.